You think you're special because you can cook? You're just a line cook who couldn't handle a real career. That was the sentence that didn't just end a relationship. It exposed everything that had been quietly rotting for 3 years. Tonight's story is about a man who believed love was built through consistency, effort, and showing up, only to realize he had been giving to someone who never intended to give anything back. Because sometimes, the problem isn't what someone refuses to do for you, it's the system they build to make you feel guilty for asking. Before we begin, this is a fictionalized story, created for entertainment and storytelling purposes. Names, characters, and events have been altered or adapted from online discussions. Any resemblance to real people or situations is purely coincidental. AI was used only to assist with language polishing and voice production. The structure, narrative, decisions, and emotional framing are human-created.
I've been lurking here for a while, but never thought I'd be posting. This situation has been eating at me for weeks, and I need some outside perspective because I honestly don't know if I'm being unreasonable here. I'm Jack, 31, and I've been working as a professional chef for about 8 years now. Started in small bistros, worked my way up through some pretty decent restaurants in downtown Chicago, and currently I'm sous chef at a place that does modern American with French techniques. It's demanding work, 12 to 14-hour days, constant pressure, burns and cuts are just part of the job. But I genuinely love what I do. There's something about transforming raw ingredients into something that makes people happy that just clicks for me. My girlfriend Melissa and I have been together for 3 years. When we first started dating, she was always impressed when I'd cook for her. Nothing too fancy at home after a long day at work. The last thing I want is to recreate restaurant complexity in my own kitchen, but I'd make her pasta with a good sauce, a nice stir-fry, maybe braise some short ribs on weekends. She'd always go on about how lucky she was to have a personal chef and how her friends were jealous. Here's where it gets complicated. Melissa has always been pretty vocal about feminist issues, which I respect. She works in marketing, and she's dealt with some real bullshit from male colleagues over the years. She's called out unfair treatment, fought for equal pay, all stuff I completely support. But somewhere along the line, this evolved into what feels like a very rigid ideology about gender roles. Last month, I had one of those days. You know the type, line cook called out sick, food critic showed up unannounced, ticket times were running long, and I basically didn't sit down for 13 straight hours. When I got home around 11 p.m., I was wiped. Melissa was on the couch watching Netflix and asked what I was making for dinner. I looked at her and said, "Would you mind cooking tonight? I'm really beat, and it would mean a lot to me." Simple request, right? She got this look on her face, like I'd just asked her to scrub the floor with a toothbrush. I don't cook, Jack. You know that. I'm not going to fulfill some outdated gender expectation just because society says women belong in the kitchen. I tried to explain that this wasn't about gender roles. It was about partners helping each other out when one person is exhausted. I said I'd been cooking for her basically every night for 3 years, and asking for one night where she cooked wasn't me trying to oppress her. "That's different," she said. "You're literally a professional chef. It's your passion. For me, cooking is just domestic labor that's been used to keep women subordinate for centuries." I pointed out that she seemed pretty happy to eat what I cooked every night, and that if cooking was really this symbol of oppression, maybe she should have mentioned that before I spent 3 years doing it. She got defensive and said I was weaponizing my career to make her feel guilty, and that she shouldn't have to justify her stance on gender equality to me. The conversation ended with her ordering Thai food for herself, and me eating a sleeve of saltines for dinner. The thing is, I've thought about this a lot since then. I'm not some traditional guy who thinks women should do all the cooking and cleaning. My mom worked full-time, and my dad did plenty of cooking when I was growing up. Half the best chefs I know are women, and they sure as hell aren't doing it because society oppressed them into it. But what's really bothering me is the double standard. Melissa has no problem benefiting from my cooking every single night, but the moment I ask her to reciprocate once, suddenly it becomes this feminist issue. She orders takeout for herself constantly, but won't make even a sandwich to share. When I suggested we could cook together sometimes, just as a fun couple activity, she shut that down too. I've been doing some soul searching about whether I'm being unfair here. Am I asking too much? Should I just accept that cooking is going to be 100% my responsibility in this relationship? Is her stance reasonable, and I'm just not seeing it? The weird part is, I used to love cooking for her. Seeing her face light up when I'd make her favorite carbonara, or when I'd surprise her with some new technique I learned at work, that used to make all the effort worth it. But now it feels different, like I'm just the help. Last week she complained that I was phoning it in because I made simple grilled chicken instead of something more elaborate. When I said I was tired and wanted something easy, she said, well, it's what you do for a living, so it should be easy by now. I don't know, guys. Is this salvageable? Am I missing something here? After a week, I decided to try a different approach. Instead of asking Melissa to cook, I just stopped cooking for her. If she really believed cooking was oppressive domestic labor, then I wouldn't impose that burden on her, and I wouldn't impose it on myself either outside of work. For the first few days, she didn't seem to care. She ordered delivery or picked up pre-made stuff from the grocery store. I made simple meals for myself, omelets, salads, basic proteins, easy stuff that didn't require much mental energy after work. But then things got weird. Last Wednesday, I came home to find she'd bought about $150 worth of groceries. High-end stuff too, Wagyu beef, fresh lobster tails, expensive aged cheeses, heirloom tomatoes, all just sitting on the counter, no plan for using them. When I asked what it was for, she said, I thought maybe you'd want to cook something nice. I told her that if she wanted Wagyu, she was welcome to cook it herself, or we could cook it together. She just shrugged and left it all sitting there. 2 days later, half of it was spoiled. When I pointed this out, she said it wasn't her responsibility to keep track of groceries she didn't plan to use. That should have been my first real warning sign. Friday night, I was making myself a simple pasta, just butter, garlic, and some Parmesan. Melissa was in the living room, but she kept walking through the kitchen, making comments. Smells good. Wish I could have some. That looks really professional. I guess I'll just have my sad desk salad. I offered to make extra if she wanted some. She said no, she didn't want to enable the patriarchy by accepting food from a man. But she kept hovering around the kitchen with this martyred expression. Then Saturday happened. I had a rare day off, and I was planning to do some meal prep for the week. Nothing fancy, just some roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, maybe a grain salad. But when I went to start cooking, the kitchen was destroyed. Oil everywhere, and I mean everywhere. All over the stove, the counters, even splashed on the walls. The good olive oil I use for finishing dishes, a $40 bottle that I'd been saving, was just sitting there open with oil pooled around it. Every single pot and pan was out and dirty, even though nothing had been cooked in them. There was flour scattered across the floor, like someone had been making pasta from scratch, but no evidence that any actual food had been made. It took me 3 hours to clean everything properly. 3 hours on my only day off. I found Melissa in the bedroom, reading on her phone like nothing had happened. She looked up when I walked in, completely casual. I just stared at her. Melissa, what happened in the kitchen? She shrugged, not even looking up from her phone. Oh, I tried to cook something earlier, but it got too complicated, so I gave up. I figured you'd want to clean it up anyway, since you care more about the kitchen being organized. I stood there for a moment, processing what she'd just said. You figured I'd want to clean up your mess? It's not a mess, Adrian. I was trying to learn something new. Isn't that what you wanted? I went back to the kitchen. It took me 3 hours to clean everything properly. 3 hours on my only day off. When I was finally done, I went back to find her. She was still in the same spot, scrolling through Instagram. We need to talk, I said. She sighed dramatically. If this is about the kitchen thing again, the oil was on 3 different walls, Melissa. There's no cooking technique that requires throwing oil at the walls. Her expression shifted slightly, but she kept her voice level. You're being really controlling about this, Adrian. It's my kitchen, too. I have every right to use it. Use it, sure, but you just told me that you don't cook because it's oppressive gender role bullshit. I was trying to learn. Her voice went up an octave. I thought maybe I could try, but you're making me feel terrible about my efforts. I've taught a lot of people to cook over the years. New line cooks who've never held a knife properly, friends who burned water, volunteers at community centers who were genuinely scared of the stove. None of them had ever created destruction on this level. This wasn't someone learning. This was someone taking their anger out on my space. I told her this wasn't working, and we needed to have a serious conversation about our relationship. She started crying and said I was choosing kitchen stuff over her feelings, and that she was trying her best to compromise. But I was never satisfied. I've been staying at my buddy Marcus's place for the past 3 nights, just to get some headspace. Marcus is also in the industry. He's the head chef at a small farm-to-table place, and he's been letting me vent. He said something that stuck with me. Man, she's not mad about gender roles. She's mad that you have something you're passionate about that doesn't revolve around her. I think he might be right. When I really think about it, Melissa has never been supportive of my career in any real way. She likes the benefits, the good food, the fact that she can impress people by saying her boyfriend is a chef, but she's never shown interest in what I actually do. She's never asked about a dish I'm working on, never wanted to hear about a technique I learned, never even suggested eating at a restaurant where I used to work. She's coming over tonight to talk things through, but honestly, I'm not sure what there is to talk about. The kitchen thing feels like a symptom of a bigger problem. Sorry for the novel. Just needed to get this all out. She suggested we take turns choosing what to eat each night. Either I cook, or we order delivery, or she'd figure something out. I agreed, mostly because I was curious to see what figuring something out would look like. Monday, I cooked. Tuesday, we ordered pizza. Wednesday, she made peanut butter sandwiches and ate them while standing at the counter, then went to her room. Okay, fine. Technically, she fed herself, but here's where it gets interesting. Yesterday, I had the morning shift and got home around 3 p.m. I was planning to prep dinner when I heard voices coming from our kitchen. I figured Melissa had a friend over, which was fine, but then I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Oh my God, you have to teach me how to make this. I've been wanting to learn to cook forever, but I'm so intimidated by it. That was not Melissa's voice. I quietly walked toward the kitchen and saw Melissa with our new neighbor, Claire. I'd met Claire briefly when she moved in about a month ago, seemed nice, works in graphic design, mentioned she was into food photography. But I hadn't really talked to her beyond basic neighbor pleasantries. Here's the kicker. Melissa was cooking. Actually cooking. She had ingredients out, she was actively stirring something on the stove, and she was explaining to Claire what she was doing. She was making what looked like a pretty decent stir-fry, and she was clearly comfortable moving around the kitchen. I just stood there, completely speechless. Claire noticed me first. Oh hey, Jack. Melissa was just telling me about this awesome dish she learned from her mom. She's such a good cook. Melissa's face went white when she saw me. I mean, completely drained of color. I managed to say something like, "Oh, hey Claire. Yeah. Melissa's really something in the kitchen." My voice probably sounded weird because Claire gave me a confused look. They finished cooking, and Claire took a plate back to her apartment, gushing about how delicious everything was and how she couldn't wait to try making it herself. After she left, I just looked at Melissa. So, you can cook. She started with the excuses immediately. She said she was just experimenting, and it was different when it was for a friend because there was no pressure. She insisted that cooking for me specifically was still problematic because of relationship dynamics and gendered expectations. I asked her why she'd never mentioned that she actually knew how to cook. She said it wasn't relevant because she didn't want to cook for me anyway. Then I asked the question that I think broke the whole thing open. Melissa, what exactly is the difference between cooking for Claire and cooking for me? She couldn't answer. She just kept saying it was different and that I wouldn't understand because I was a man. That's when it hit me. This was never about feminism or gender roles or domestic labor. This was about control. Think about it. She was perfectly happy to benefit from my cooking for 3 years. She was comfortable cooking for a female friend she barely knew. But the moment I asked her to cook for me, just once, suddenly it became this big ideological stand. She wasn't opposed to cooking. She was opposed to doing anything that might make her feel like she owed me something or like she was contributing equally to the relationship. I told her I needed some time to think, and I've been at Marcus's place again since last night. Marcus took one look at me when I walked in and just opened a beer. He said he'd been wondering when I'd figure it out. The whole gender role thing was just the excuse she could use that would make you feel guilty for pushing back, he said. Smart, honestly. Who's going to argue with someone about feminism? But I bet she's never applied that same energy to anything else in your relationship. And you know what? He's right. Melissa has never had a problem with me paying for dinner dates. She's never objected to me handling the masculine tasks like moving furniture or dealing with the car maintenance. She's never suggested we split those duties 50/50 or worried about reinforcing gender stereotypes when it benefited her. This whole thing was about her finding a way to avoid reciprocating while making me feel like the bad guy for expecting basic consideration. I'm done. I'm calling the landlord tomorrow to ask about breaking the lease early. Worst case, I'll eat the penalty and find a roommate situation somewhere. Marcus said I can crash at his place as long as I need to. The thing that really gets me is that I would have been totally fine if she just said, hey, I don't really like cooking, can we work something else out? We could have ordered more takeout, or meal prep together, or figured out some other arrangement. But instead, she turned it into this whole psychological game where I was supposedly the oppressor for asking my partner to occasionally do something nice for me. I feel stupid for not seeing it earlier, but I guess I wanted to believe her reasoning was genuine. I broke up with Melissa 2 days ago. It went exactly as you'd expect. I'd been staying at Marcus's, but I needed to get more of my stuff from the apartment. I texted Melissa that I'd be coming by around 6 p.m. when I knew she'd be home from work because I wanted to have the conversation in person. When I got there, she immediately started with how much she'd missed me and how sorry she was about everything. She said she'd been doing some self-reflection and realized she might have been too rigid in her thinking. She wanted to work on communication and suggested we try couples counseling. I told her I appreciated that, but I'd realized we had fundamentally different values about partnership and reciprocity. I said I needed to be with someone who wanted to contribute to the relationship in good faith, not someone who looked for reasons to avoid it. That's when the mask completely came off. She started screaming about how I was choosing my ego over our relationship and how she'd given me 3 years of her life. She said I was throwing away everything we had over petty kitchen bullshit. Then she said something that just crystallized everything. You think you're so special because you can cook? You're just a line cook with delusions of grandeur. You work in a kitchen because you couldn't handle a real career. There it was. 3 years of pretending to respect what I do, all gone in one moment of anger. I told her I'd be back the next day to get my things, and I left. When I came back yesterday with Marcus and his truck, she wasn't there. But she'd left a note on the kitchen counter, because of course she did, saying she was disappointed in me and that I'd changed from the man she fell in love with. She said she hoped I'd find someone who appreciates me, but she doubted I would because I was too selfish to be in a real relationship. The note was sitting next to my good chef's knife, which she'd apparently used to cut up a cardboard box and left all scratched up. My expensive olive oil was gone. Not spilled this time, just gone. Marcus took one look at the knife and just shook his head. Man, she really couldn't help herself, could she? Moving out was actually easier than I expected. Turns out when you're not walking on eggshells around someone, you can get a lot done quickly. I'm crashing at Marcus's for now, but I've got a line on a 1-bedroom place in Wicker Park that's perfect for a single guy. Close to work, decent kitchen, and the rent is actually cheaper than what I was paying for half of that 2-bedroom. But here's the best part of this whole thing. Remember Claire, the neighbor? She knocked on Marcus's door yesterday evening. She'd gotten my number from Melissa, apparently before the whole breakup drama, and wanted to ask if I'd be willing to give her some actual cooking lessons. I know this might be weird timing. She said, but I've been thinking about what Melissa was teaching me, and I realize I want to learn the real basics, not just one random stir-fry. Would you be willing to teach me? I'd pay you, of course. You guys, it felt so good to talk to someone who was genuinely interested in learning. Claire asked actual questions about technique. She wanted to understand why you do things certain ways. She even asked about my work and how I got into cooking professionally. We set up a lesson for this weekend at Marcus's place. Nothing weird or date like just a basic knife skills and sauce fundamentals class, but having someone treat my skills with actual respect instead of taking them for granted. I'd forgotten how good that felt. I also realize now how much I'd been dimming my own enthusiasm around Melissa. I stopped talking about work because she'd get this glazed over look. I stopped experimenting with new techniques at home because she'd make comments about me showing off. I basically made myself smaller to accommodate someone who didn't even like me that much. The guys at work have noticed the difference too. Chef pulled me aside yesterday and said I seemed more like myself lately. He also mentioned that there's going to be an opening for head chef at their sister restaurant next year, and that I should think about whether I'd be interested. 6 months ago, I would have automatically said no because Melissa always complained about my hours and how the industry was unstable. Now, I'm definitely interested. I'm not saying the breakup was easy. 3 years is 3 years, and there are things I'll miss. But I'm not going to miss feeling like I had to justify my passion to someone who was supposed to be my partner. I'm not going to miss feeling guilty for expecting basic reciprocity. And I'm definitely not going to miss walking on eggshells in my own kitchen. To everyone who told me I deserved better, thank you. You were right, even when I wasn't ready to hear it. I'm cooking again, guys. Really cooking. Last night, I made Mark's this thing with duck confit that I'd been wanting to try for months. It felt like coming home.
All right. That's the story for today. What looked like a disagreement about cooking was never about cooking. It was about reciprocity, respect, and the quiet ways one person can take while convincing the other they're wrong for noticing. So, we got the lessons. A healthy relationship isn't measured by who gives more. It's measured by whether both people want to give. The moment effort becomes one-sided and justified by excuses, the relationship has already started to collapse. And the author's opinion: Jack didn't lose a partner, he lost a system that was slowly shrinking him. And the moment he stepped out of it, he didn't just get his freedom back. He got himself back. Sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's the first honest decision you've made in a long time.